Thanks, Ann. So I have a few questions for the audience first. How many of you have never done the FAFSA before? So you have no idea what kind of changes are even occurring? Excellent. How many of you have done FAFSAs in your households before? You'll be here for 3 hours. It's 108 slides. I'll have you home by 10. It's really not quite that bad. They've made some pretty significant changes about how the FAFSA gets completed. So the first part of my presentation tonight, I will talk a little bit more about some of the financial aid terms and things that are helpful. So when you're reviewing financial aid offers from different schools, hopefully some of the terminology starts making sense to you. And then the second half, we will spend time actually looking at screenshots from the FAFSA and talking a little bit more about some of the changes and what's some key things that are very important. So these are just a few of the topics that we're going to hone in on tonight. Financial aid, what is it? Cost of attendance, student aid index, financial need. Everybody has financial need, right? We all think we do, but we'll talk about the government definition, different categories, the FAFSA, and some special circumstances. Financial aid is basically a very general term. It's a term that is kind of over-encompassing. It includes any type of funding that's received to help support the cost of college. And what is the cost of college? That's a pretty big debate because there's direct costs and indirect costs, but the types of things that financial aid departments are required to put into a budget or the cost of attendance is tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, and some miscellaneous personal expenses. What is a student aid index? That is brand new this year, but for some of us who've been in financial aid for 33 years like myself, it used to be called the student aid index in my early career. And then we moved to EFC, expected family contribution, and now we're back to student aid index. The student aid index is a measure of how they're going to determine and distribute different types of funding. And part of it comes from the student information that's entered on the FAFSA, part of it comes from the parent contribution. What is financial need? The government definition, you take your cost of attendance or your budget, you subtract out your student aid index, and that is your financial need. This becomes important because there is a need-based aid and there is non-need-based aid. There's different sources of financial aid. The sources are scholarships and grants. Those are typically the ones you never have to repay. I use the word typically because there's some rare circumstances where you might. Then there's loans and work opportunities on campuses. All of those different types of funding come from federal government, employers, state governments, or state, I should use, we always say the word government, but it's really the federal taxpayers, the state taxpayers, because it all comes out of your tax-based funding. From colleges and universities, and then from private sources. So the federal government is the program that provides the majority of the funding across the country for students. They're the largest source, and the aid is primarily on the basis of financial need. And you must apply each year using the FAFSA to be considered for any of the funding. And then there's eligibility requirements that must be met. The biggest thing in here for many of you is remembering you have to apply every year. Typically that's October 1st. This year, it's been delayed due to some of these significant changes coming through. We still don't have a date. So even in where we should be in the know sooner, we don't have a date yet either. We're just told sometime in December it'll be opening up. So the types of programs that come from the federal sources is the Pell Grant. That's the most widely known program. The Iraq, Afghanistan Service Grant. So for people who are not Pell eligible, but a parent passed away in service, they can receive funding through that program. The Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. That's a program that is given typically to also Pell recipients. There's a Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education TEACH grant. This is one of these grants that I talked about that can become a loan. There's a lot of things to read about it, so if anybody's going into education, and oftentimes this isn't something for a freshman award, it's something to be offered later on as a sophomore or junior. But there's requirements when you get out of school to teach at least 10 years in a school district that meets the criteria for it to stay a grant rather than turning into a loan. The federal work-study program, where you work on campuses and they pay you a wage. They cannot force you to put that towards your tuition. However, there are cases whereby sometimes it's encouraged or highly sought after if you want to remain in school because you have a balance that you need to get satisfied. Federal direct student loans, and the federal direct, some are subsidized, which is need-based, some are unsubsidized, which is not need-based. And then there's a federal plus loan, which is a loan for parents, where parents can borrow money to help support paying for tuition and room and board. In the state funding, there's typically residency requirements. So in the state of Wisconsin, our grant programs here do not cross borders. So if you're looking at a school in Illinois or basically out of state anywhere, your state grant, if you would be eligible at a school in Wisconsin, it will not travel with you to a school outside of the state. And the other thing within the state, there's 3 different formulas and funding levels, one for 4-year publics, one for 2-year publics, and then one for the private nonprofit colleges. And then there's one for the tribal college. So those are the 4 different types of funding levels. They all don't look the same. So what you might get at St. Norbert might be different than UW Green Bay, different from Northeast Tech. So they all might look a little differently depending upon the type of school you're looking at. All of them use, aid may be provided on the basis of both merit and need. So the majority of the big state grants are need-based, so it's all going to be used by the, determined by the FAFSA data. And some of the smaller grant programs in the state of Wisconsin have some academic expectations that go with them. So they, to be considered, they'll look at financial need information and some academic information. Again, I mentioned the FAFSA is used in the state of Wisconsin to make all determinations. And if you're looking out of state, if there's ever a state grant program that can be used for you going to that state, that would be the one time to make sure you pay attention to their deadlines. Colleges and universities are providing both merit and need-based aid. When I started in financial aid 32 years ago, I know I said it twice now, I'm aging myself. However, back in some of those days, the public universities could never offer private funding sources or college funding sources, whereby now they've been raising money to help support students as well. So they have definitely changed the opportunities available for students. So keep that in mind if you're looking at public schools. Don't dismiss the fact that there might not be any funding. Always take time to look and see what they have to offer. Again, they use information from the FAFSA, or some schools might have an institutional form. You know, some of your Ivy League schools, like your Marquettes, your Harvards, I can't even think of them all, Berkeley, Stanfords, you know, they all will have a supplemental form that would be required as well. And again, deadlines and applications vary by institution, so it's important to pay attention to the schools that you're considering and what their deadlines or priority dates are. Anybody want to guess what the difference is between a priority date and a deadline? They kind of sound like one and the same, right? So a deadline is an absolute. After the deadline, you're out of luck. A priority date is you're probably better off if you have it all done by then, but you still might be okay if you don't. So that's the real difference between a deadline and a priority date in the financial aid world. Private sources of funding, foundations, businesses, churches, civics, charitable organizations, and I would imagine we have a website here where you put local scholarships on, is that correct? I'm looking. Okay. Oh, they're sitting back here. I'm trying to find them in the crowd. So that's definitely one place for you to take time to look at and apply. I always use my son, Mr. Taylor, here as an example at this point when I talk about private funding. He had a mother that required him to sit in the basement. The basement's fixed up, don't worry, it's not a dungeon. But I made him sit and fill out scholarship applications. And we got to the end, and he probably had 20, 25 of them filled out by now. And I said, you need to do this one yet? And I get, oh, Mom, I'm not gonna get this. I said, well, you don't know till you fill it out. Mom, I'm number, 16, 17 in my class. They're smarter kids than me. And this is from our Kohler Foundation. Kohler Foundation by us gives every high school 2 $5,000 scholarships to give out to students. I don't know why you're making me do this. And I said, well, it's the last one, half hour. You got all the information, cut, paste, put it together, we're done. So 3 months go by, we get to the award ceremony, and they're giving out different scholarships, and lo and behold, they call Walter Taylor up for the Kohler Foundation scholarship. Only 7 kids applied. So my whole moral of this story is, don't count yourself out, because you never know what your competition is. He also applied for a pig scholarship because he showed hogs in his day. So the Tri-County Pork Producers give out a scholarship, and he was one of the top seniors in the county, showing he got to go to nationals for livestock judging. I'm bragging a little bit, but he did some stuff on the state level. And anyway, we learn about it, and we're disappointed because he didn't get that one. They gave it to a beef kid. So my whole point is, you never know what the committee's looking for. You never know what their decision's going to be. Thankfully, he did receive it the second year because, of course, his mother made him apply a second time. Because they're not just for this year, everybody, all of you that are students in the crowd, you're going to do this again and again and again. It's one of the best things to do to help yourself out and not have to shovel out all that money or borrow the money for school. All right, I'm off my soapbox here. Again, deadlines may vary. Begin researching private things. Don't ever pay for a scholarship search. There's plenty of free ones out there with search engines that are great. I watched fastweb.com when my kids were at that age. And the internship that he participated in West Chicago at Ball Horticulture was actually in the queue as one that he should be applying for. So you keep updating your profile and keeping track of these years, year after year as you're in school. It's a needle in a haystack. I don't ever want to deny that, but you have to kind of figure out to yourselves which needles you need to try to thread and see where it all works out for you. Employers might have scholarships for children. They may have educational benefits. Because of where the workforce is right now, there's more and more employers doing different benefits to try to help families out. And even a number of years ago, we had a number of students that came over from Michigan, and a number of them work in the car industry. Their parents do over there. And one young man came into my office, he's a senior, and he says, Mrs. Taylor, you'll never guess. I said, probably not, so why don't you tell me? My mom just learned I can get a scholarship from the company. I said, well, that's exciting. He said, yeah, you know what the bad part is, though? I could have been doing this for 4 years. We never thought to ask. So it's something no is a no, and it's okay to receive the answer no, but if you don't ask, you never have no way of knowing, period. So take time to learn what's available from your companies. All right. Now we're going to get into the FAFSA. What does the FAFSA really do? What does it stand for? It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And you're going to fill this out at studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov is a landing page that you will learn to love, students, because after a while you can see any federal aid that's been dispersed and see your whole history. And there are annual limits, there are career limits. So believe it or not, you kind of have to pay attention, even though you do this once a year and then you kind of forget about it till the next year. So it is something you need to kind of put on your watch list a little. If you really want to challenge yourself, you don't have to do it in English. You can do it in Spanish or 9 other languages. You guys were supposed to laugh at that. Federal student aid is indicating a December opening date. Again, I commented that we don't know the date yet, but the date, they'll probably let us know. We think we might learn after Thanksgiving first, Or the last week of November is our Federal Student Aid Conference, where all the colleges across the country get together and listen to the Department of Ed share a lot of information out to us. And we're thinking they might announce it then. So we're hoping after Thanksgiving we'll have a date for everybody. One of the most important things to do before you start your FAFSA, students, if you haven't done this yet, you can create your Federal Student Aid ID, known as the FSA ID. Put it someplace safe. You will use this every year when you want to access your FAFSA. Parents will also need one. There's only one owner of your FAFSA. And to obtain the Federal Student Aid ID, you can do it at the website noted. The FAFSA asks questions about dependency status, and everybody's trying to figure out how to get their son or daughter independent. Every senior I know is sometimes trying to figure out how to get themselves dependent until they want mom and dad to pay for something. But at the end of the day, the government makes it hard to be independent. Between the ages of 18 and 24, they want students to be dependent for the FAFSA. But there are definitely situations that warrant an 18-year-old to be independent. There are special circumstances. There are circumstances that happen in our families that sometimes we cannot document on the FAFSA, because the FAFSA is going to pull data from the tax year of 2022. Well, that was all of last year. Already 2023 is almost done. And it's going to do a snapshot of your assets. So if something occurred between 2022 that's different on the taxes, like a loss of a job, a death of a parent, high medical bills, we didn't expect mom to have a heart attack and have all these bills now. Any of those types of things cannot be captured on the FAFSA. Those are all things you start talking to your financial aid offices about. Financial aid offices have the opportunity to make that decision, so you can't appeal back to the Department of Ed. So we actually are given the authority to make appropriate adjustments when warranted. This is just kind of a list of some of the different types of special circumstances that might occur. All right, you ready for the real fun? So here's an overview. Major changes. The FSA ID is required to access the FAFSA form. In the past, you could get into the form and you could get your FSA user ID later, or you could print out the form and sign. Not anymore. You can't even start it without it. So you have to have that FSA ID before you can even start it. Users without a social security number, you can still create an FSA user ID. That is new. You couldn't do that in the past. So if you don't have a social security number, you can still complete the FAFSA. It's a role-based FAFSA, meaning the student has a role, one or two parents might have a role in how you go through the form completing it. We're going to introduce the definition of contributors. What does a contributor mean? Contributors is anybody who's going to be putting data on the FAFSA. So it's a parent, other parent, student, spouse, student, when invited by a parent or a preparer. Contributors must provide the required information and sign their respective section for a FAFSA form for it to be considered complete. And again, that signature is going to be with an FSA ID. It's not going to be paper anymore. A FAFSA onboarding experience for both initial entry and correction. So you're going to be able to watch a lot of little video clips on how to proceed to the next one. They're like 3 to 5 minute clips of what's going to happen. Parent of record. So what parent information goes on the FAFSA? If parents live together, it's the income and assets of both parents. If they are divorced or separated, only the income and assets of the parent who provides the greater portion of the student financial support. That doesn't mean student financial support for college. It's more student financial support right now while they're in their senior year of school. If there's the death of a parent, it's either the parent, if either of the parents have passed, the surviving parent shall be considered the single parent until that parent has remarried. If both parents have passed, the student shall not report any parental income or assets. Remarried parents, the income of the parent's spouse shall be included in determining the parent's assessment of adjusted available income. If the student's parent and the step-parent are married as of the date of application for the aid year concerned. And then a single parent is one who's divorced or separated or never married. They would just use that information. For dependent students with divorced or separated parents, so income and assets are reported for parents who provide most financial support over 12 months prior to filling out the FAFSA. Even if student does not live with the parent or lives with the other parent. If neither parent provided support in a 12-month period, in number 1, parent of record is parent who provided greater support during the most recent year student received financial support from them. If equal support is given, parent of record is the one with the higher income and assets. Bet you nobody saw that one coming. I make that little slide remark, but at the end of the day, the government is looking for, how are people financially surviving once in a while, and oftentimes it is a parent on record that has a stronger financial situation that is helping support. And I also know sometimes it isn't, but that's the direction they're looking at, is the one who might have more financial support. So the student has to invite a parent or parents. This is the landing page. So this is the main FAFSA form landing page. On the page, students are directed to start a new form or edit existing form. So if you start this and you can't finish it, at least you know you can come back to it, that you're not in it all, or that it all goes away if you leave it. You can save it and come back to it. So we're going to pretend for this presentation that the student is brand new and beginning. So the student can log in. They're going to start a new form. They're using their email or FSAID username and password. The dependent student's role. So the student is going to select, I am the student, filling this out. If you notice one thing about the way this is going so far, they're very decisive about making sure the student knows this is the student's responsibility. Now, as parents, we also know sometimes we don't want our students to know as much about our financial situation as they, for this form, but you'll have your chance to put it in privately at a different point. So this is where you can watch the little clip and learn about the FAFSA a little bit. It's one of there's 4 clips. So dependent student onboarding, the second clip, they're going to talk about who are contributors, and we went through that a little bit. Which parent or parents do you invite to fill out information? And now they're going to talk to you a little bit about what to expect. And after submitting the FAFSA form, this is the last page of the landing, or the onboarding, and tells you a little bit what to expect. So in the first page, we're going to talk about some of the identity information. So you're going to make sure it all matches what was listed on the FSA, what you did with the FSA ID. I always think it's a great idea if you've never looked at your Social Security card in a long time. Now's a good time to verify that you have been using the right number all along, because you don't want to mix it up when you sign up for your FSA user ID. What they found, so down in Texas, they require, before graduation, every school complete a FAFSA. That's a graduation requirement. And what they've learned is that people don't take time to make sure they have all the right information. So there's a lot of bad information out there where somebody might have used your number and you don't even know it, because of some of these states requiring people to do FAFSAs and students not taking the time to make sure they have the right ID information for their moms and dads, and or if the moms and dads are doing it and not giving out the right information for their son or daughter. So it's real important to make sure that your name and address is correct, your Social Security number is correct, your date of birth is correct. Again, this is where the address goes in. State of legal residence, that's important for state grants, so you want to make sure you get that correct. Dependent student consent. Here's another biggie. If you decide you don't want to give consent, you're done filling out the FAFSA, you're not eligible for anything. It's that simple. It sounds horrific, but it's that simple. If you don't give consent, you're automatically done and you don't get any money. The consent is to bring any tax information over from the IRS. So you have to select approve to provide consent to get to the next page. And so this is where you actually get to answer a few questions. Dependent personal circumstances. So here they're talking about personal circumstances whereby if there's reasonable reason to believe you can't obtain parent information. Dependent student's marital status. Dependent student college or career school plans. You know, are you going to be a freshman? Are you going to be a sophomore? For those of you that are looking eventually to get your master's degree, if you're going into psychology and you want to be a psychiatrist or a school psychologist or anything like that where you need your master's, what you're applying for right now is your bachelor's. If you're going to a tech school, make sure you understand, are you getting an associate degree there? Are you getting a vocational degree? What type of degree are you receiving? And that, because that's what you're applying for at the moment, is whatever that degree is, not what your future holds for you. So the personal circumstances, if none of these things relate to you, and they use personal circumstances in here to help determine dependency. So they're looking at things like, this is where I need my glasses. If the student is in active duty with the military, if you are under the age of 13, were you ever a ward of the court? Do you have a legal guardian? Is there a risk of being homeless? So these are all types of things that if you answer yes to any one of these, you would become an independent and you wouldn't need to ask for a parent to be a contributor of data on your FAFSA. Other circumstances, were you ever an unaccompanied youth, or this was the one at risk of being homeless? And then this gets into, you know, if you ever left home because of some abusive situation or things like that. And again, if you answer yes to any one of those questions, that's when you no longer need parental information. But I will guarantee you, at most schools that you are considering, they will ask for documentation to support it. So that might be a letter from someone from the guidance counseling here, from your church, if there's a pastor you've been working with, or minister, or priest. If you've been working with the social services in the area, but they will ask for documentation to support it. If parents are unwilling to provide data, so they have it, you're in a happy household, and parents have information, but every once in a while, you know, I'm one of those, I grew up, you know, where I don't need to give my kid my information because it's none of his business. You could ask him, he'll agree to that. But for this, the way things have changed over time, this is stuff you just have to do if you want to be considered for federal aid. So as parents, if you're completely unwilling, then the student has access to a direct unsubsidized loan only, and that is it. There is no other funding for them but that, and that's $4,000 a year the first 2 years and $5,000 the second 2 years. So with the price of college, that doesn't get you too far. It might help you at a tech school, but once you get to a 4-year school, it gets a little tougher. So now is when the student can tell about the parents and put information. Are your parents married to each other? Yes or no? You can invite the parent to complete their part of the FAFSA. So they put in the parent's social security number and an email address. This email address should match what this parent used when they set up their FSA user ID. It's helpful because then it matches everything up all the time. There's some student demographics that are going to be asked. So for example, the grade, if you're, so some of this stuff you have to answer in the demographic area, some of it is optional. So if you're male or female or non-binary, or prefer to not answer, if you're transgender, student race and ethnicity. So are you not Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin? Are you yes to Mexican, Native American, or I can't, Chicano? Yes to Puerto Rican. So, and again, you don't have to answer these. These are just questions they're posing. What is your race? White, black or African American, Asian, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander? Prefer not to answer. So you have a choice if you want to answer these or not. Citizenship of the student. And then we get into parent education status. Did either of the student's parents attend college? This is important to help identify first-generation college students on campuses and for some different grant programs. So this is a way, like for the state of Wisconsin, we have some funding for students for their first gen, and they meet certain other financial eligibility. So this is it's important for you to answer, to know the parent's educational background. Parent killed in the line of duty, that helps with that Iraqi-Afghanistan grant. High school completion, so you're going to want to put in here if you completed high school. They also give the option for homeschool or state-recognized high school equivalent, so if you have a GED or a HSED. I recommend you all get to the finish line here. It's a lot easier. Dependent student high school information, so you want to make sure you list the high school that you're attending. You're going to confirm the high school. And that's important because there's times we have to do a verification of the high school that you attended. So if you don't find the high school you're enrolled in and you just kind of wing it and try and get past it, sometimes we go back to you and say, you need to fill this out and you need to get a notary to verify that your high school transcript is real and that you actually graduated from that high school. So take the time to make sure you find the school in the list. Okay, student tax return information. So you're going to put in a little information about what you know about your tax return. So this is another one of those adulting things for all of you seniors in the room. You start getting to learn a little bit more about what information on your tax return really means. You're going to put some information in about your assets and when it comes to assets, there's some really fine print in the back and also on the help key in here that will help you know what to list, what not to list. For students, many times there's a little more simplicity unless there's a trust involved somewhere. But for students, oftentimes, it's your savings account, your CDs, checking. So if there's a savings account for college under your name, you might need to include that value. Then you're going to start putting in your colleges. And again, if you have the school codes for your schools, it's a lot easier to whip through this section. They are no longer collecting on here if you're living in college-sponsored housing or not. So make sure you find out from your colleges how they are collecting that information. Oftentimes it's off your application. But if it's changing ever because you live close to home and you're undecided, am I going to live on campus at UWGB or am I going to commute? Those are things you need. If you're going to change it, you probably need to let their office know because it changes in the budget, the cost of attendance. So it might change some of your unsubsidized loan to subsidized. It might make you eligible for work study. So those are things if you're going, it's important to notify the financial aid office and or the housing to make sure that they know what your housing plans are. The other thing that's important with the colleges, if you're looking at schools out of state and looking at schools in state, list the in-school states first. We don't get to see, colleges don't get to see any other college you're putting on this FAFSA. We only know that we get the information because you listed us. So we're not going and looking to say, Well, you put Madison first, and you put Concordia second, and you put UWGB third, but really your interest for here, you need to make sure you list the first 6 schools should be in-state schools if you're looking at in-state schools. Because right now, the state of Wisconsin is, they're implementing a whole new software system for the 24-25 year as well. But in the past, it used to only be able to download and look at the first 6 schools on a person's FAFSA. And I haven't heard where they're at with that change, if they're going to be able to make that change or not. So when you're filling out the colleges, Wisconsin schools get listed first, regardless who your top choice is. So you're going to get to review all the information you just inputted. And you get to see which parents are going to be contributors of information onto this FAFSA. And you get to make sure that your part is signed with your FSA user ID. Okay, it says you're almost there, and it gives you one last chance to remind you who it's going to be your contributors on your FAFSA. And here we start now with the parent. The parent's going to get an email inviting you to do it. So if you know your son or daughter did it today and you want to do yours today, you should get your email pretty instantaneously. But you want to make sure it's not going to your junk or clutter email. And you're going to want to log in with your FSA user ID information. And then the parent activities, what you can do to look at information. Here we're going to talk a little bit about who's contributing, that you're contributing, and what do your sections look like, what type of information do you need to have available. And we're going to use the onboarding to help with some of that, to share what the FAFSA form is. We're going to talk about the contributors form. We're going to talk about what to expect when you're filling this out, and you're going to talk about what happens after you submit your information. So again, you're going to start with the personal demographic information. Make sure it's all accurate and correct again. You're going to provide consent, because again, as a parent, if you don't provide consent, the tax return, the tax data doesn't come over, and you can just close it down and it's an invalid FAFSA and your son or daughter doesn't get any money. So again, but the fact that you're working on this together, you need to provide the consent. So this is part of the consent process. And you're going to get into some of the demographics about you. Parent current marital status, parent state of legal residence, a little bit about your finances. Again, I need my glasses. If you receive any federal means-tested benefits, so any type of food stamps or any other types of benefits that you might be receiving, this is very important again because it can make a huge significant difference in any Pell Grant funding. Dependent students' parent tax filing status, family size. So when you count them, students in the household, you count if it's mom, dad, and Johnny, you count 3 in the household, and if Johnny's the only one in school, you count Johnny in college. If you have an older sibling already in school, there's 4 of you in the family, and it says enter the number of dependents who live with and will receive more than half of your support. So you will list the number of dependents that get support from you. The person in college counts. The other sibling in college counts as people getting support. How many of the people in the parent's family will be in college? To me, this is a trick question because in the past, you always answered this question. So if there were 2 students in the household in college, you would answer 2. So now you're still answering 2. But the one big significant change in the federal calculation or the federal formula is they're looking at each individual college student independently. They're not necessarily counting them in you don't get the same benefits of having 2 in school like you might have in the past. So those types of things are going to be a little bit different. Parents' tax return information, did you receive an earned income credit, yes or no, or don't know? As a parent, if you're in school, are you getting any of these benefits for AmeriCorps or some college grants or scholarships that you had to report to the IRS? So reporting to the IRS for grants and scholarships is a great question, actually. You don't. So as students, and you go out and get a $10,000 scholarship here, $2,000 there, $4,000 here, the only time you ever have to claim scholarship dollars on a tax return is if it exceeds tuition and fees and books. You can get up to tuition, fees, and books with no tax implications. The other thing that's real different on this form is the assets. In the past, small businesses and farms were excluded. That's no longer true. They are now all included. You have to think of your assets as a photocopy today. So if I had to sell my business today, if I had to sell my farm today, if I cashed everything in today, what's it worth today? It's not waiting for the highest bidder or anything like that. It's if I had to sell it today. So you take the total value of it minus any debt against it, and that's your value today. If you make a mistake on here, because that's happened, where somebody accidentally added an extra zero, where they had $100,000 instead of $10,000, we can correct it. But we can't update it. And so a good example is, today, when I fill this out, I have $200,000 in stocks. 5 months from now, my same stocks are only worth $125,000. I cannot go back and update it because it was correct at the time. So you only can correct things that you put in incorrectly. You cannot update them. It's a photocopy of the instance today when you're signing the form for assets, values. And the other awkward thing in this section is annual child support received. That is not something they can collect through a tax return, because that doesn't land on a tax return anywhere, only alimony does, which is spousal support, or I should say ex-spousal support. So they did put child support into this section that you would have to enter. And remember, this is all based on the year 2022, so it's the child support that was received in the year of 2022. Now we're going to get into the other parent. All right. Get into the signature part. Student's FAFSA confirmation, what happens next, and the FAFSA summary. So we're at the end. So this is everything we just went through about the FAFSA speaks to basically a household of people that are married for a length of time, people that might be single, separated, divorced, but it doesn't speak to what happens if somebody got separated or remarried in the middle of it all. So if you got married in 2022, what happens? And that's where you end up inviting 2 parent contributors, because at that time, you probably filed 2 separate tax returns yet as parents. And that's how they can combine it together. If you filed married, but you're separated and you have a legal separation, or you are divorced, but you had to file married, there are ways that we can get that all separated, but make sure you invite the parent that makes the most sense based on the parent logic of who's your contributor. All right, so we're at the landing page. We finished the whole process. We have a data release number. That's not real important to most people, but it is important to us. It just means it's finished and completed. It tells you the day you completed it. It tells you the date. So when the student started it, when the parent finished it. It's going to give you a little overview based on the information you provided. It can do a quick calc of if you're eligible for Pell Grant, federal direct loans, federal work study. It can't do the SCOG because that's the campuses receive a pot of money, and we make determinations of how we're going to distribute it based on the regulations that we have to work within. And it will tell you what your student aid index is. If you notice on here, though, nowhere did you ever see present what your tax income, what your return displayed. It will always keep that under wraps. You will never see it displayed. So there is no way for you to double check to make sure that that it actually matched up with the right information. We will use the student aid index. It can go as low as negative 1,500, which is something new. It used to be if anything was negative, they rounded it to 0, but they are going down to negative 1,500. You have a chance one more time to look at a few informations and make a correction if you think something was wrong. And this is the other page that's a little, they used to give out some of this information, but they give out more. I should have turned around, I don't need my glasses. So they start, all colleges are required to share certain types of data with the U.S. Department of Education. So they can tell you graduation rates of every college, they can tell you retention rates, transfer rates, and that's transfer out, not transfer in, default rates, median debt upon completion, so what is the debt range of a typical student at the university or college, and then average annual cost. So that's based on that budget again. Don't get scared by any of this or count somebody out because of it. Still make sure you go visit your colleges, talk to people, make sure you find a college that's the right fit. Many more schools are providing college access with a number of 2-year campuses that have turned into 4-year campuses and things like that, that they're accepting other students and giving them opportunity. So sometimes those rates don't look as favorable as what they really could. Students drop out for various reasons. The last 3 years we've dealt with COVID, where we had a lot of people having to step in and out because of caring for family members and things like that. So don't let, you guys are kind of at a time where don't let any of these numbers scare you from going to a college, because there might be a lot of outside reasons of why some of those numbers look the way they do. The exciting part, though, is it's kind of fun. You don't have to do all the research yourself. They just kind of give it to you. Next steps, the student needs to, the student sees any comments that pertain to their FAFSA, and those same comments get pushed to the schools. So we also see the same comments. Sometimes there are actionable items on there. You don't know exactly what it all means, potentially, but the school might be reaching out to you. Tells you a little bit more about some of the other resources available to you. Provisionally independent student. If there's some circumstances that would help, that would require someone to be independent. It shares if, you know, what you would need to do to work with your school to make some of those changes. So you're not quite done. You got the FAFSA done, but now what's going to happen is the school is going to push out to you a financial aid offer. They will not do that until you're accepted. If they are doing it prior to your acceptance, it might be, this is what your aid might look like. This is estimated. So make sure you pay attention to the language. You know, it's one of those times it's important to read what they're actually sending to you. Oftentimes, moms and dads, this is emails and things like that are going to the students. So moms and dads, if you are helping support and pay for school, you might want to get a little snug with your senior and help them understand how important it is for them to share some of this information, because you might not be receiving it. Oh, the other thing, I'm going to go back to this other page yet. FERPA. FERPA is one of those great terms that we just talk about like we know what we're saying. FERPA is Federal Educational Rights to Privacy Act. So right now, moms and dads have all access to your records here. Once you get to college, once you are enrolled at college, moms and dads no longer have any rights unless you sign off. So remember, this is your financial aid. This is your FAFSA that needs to get completed. This is your bill. So if you don't share some of that information with moms and dads, there's no way they can know that there's an amount owed. So it's real important that you keep that connection together. I'm going to use my son for an example. It was the first semester we kind of rushed up to River Falls. We paid the bill. We went on our merry way. Life was great. We let him do what he needed to do to get settled. Second semester he calls in a panic, Mom, they say I owe money. I said, yeah. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I said, you're going to have to write a check or take it out of your bank account. But, it's that little panic mode where, because we took care of it and we didn't share any information with him, he was a little panicked how it was going to go. So we got on call with a business office and we worked together all of it, and I never had to deal with it again. It was all his. He took care of it all. Life was great. Financial aid and business offices will do that. They will work together with you to make sure that everything happens the way it needs to. We want their bills paid. As a student, you want your bill paid so that you can go on and take care of your classes and not worry about it. So that FERPA form, as students, you can sign it and you can give release to different people. You can give release to a grandparent, you can give release to a parent, you can give release to, if you have a legal guardian that you grew up with, even though you're independent now because of the FAFSA, because you don't have parents, you can give that release to a legal guardian, anybody you want to. So at least then there's someone else that can kind of help you navigate some of this once in a while. And the other thing for a federal loan, you're not quite done, you have to do the master promissory note and federal loan entrance counseling. Currently, the regulations state you just do the entrance counseling at the very first time you borrow, and you do exit counseling when you're at the end of your time at the school. There is talk, this might change to annually, where you'll be doing some type of loan counseling annually so you're aware that you have a loan that you're taking out. It's real easy to say, yep, I borrowed $5,500. And the next year you borrow $6,500, because these are the annual limits. The next year you borrow $7,500. Anybody adding this up yet? And then you borrow another $7,500 because it's your fourth year. How much have you just borrowed? And you have no idea you just really did this because you're only doing those amounts once a year. You're not paying attention to the total. And again, out at that studentaid.gov web page, you have access to all your loans, so you can keep track of all of that. My staff said I could do this in 45 minutes. I told them I couldn't, but I was close. It's 5 to 7. Questions? Yes? So the question is, with the FAFSA being pushed out later, what is happening with college deadlines for scholarships? So I know we did not make any changes to ours because we don't depend on FAFSA data to offer our scholarships. So if there's some scholarships that depend upon FAFSA data, those colleges might have made some adjustments to their dates for applying for those scholarships. I always tell you, move along, get everything else done, get applied, get your acceptance letter, get your visitations done, get that all taken care of, so then the last piece you have to worry about is the money. I know that sounds real easy and simple, and I know trying to put schedules together, sometimes it's a little more complicated, but that would be my recommendation. And watch the school's websites. Yes? I'm sorry, say the last part again. So the question is, when reporting your assets, do you include 401ks? And that answer is no, you do not include any value of your 401k. I think they're pulling it from the tax area because they have your W-2, so they know what amount you put into your 401k for the year, because they typically only cared about the amount for the year. But just to give you an idea of some things to include, you want to include the value as of today of investments, businesses, or investment farms, minus any debts. You want to include real estate, not including your home that you live in. You want to include rental property. This includes a unit within a family home that has its own entrance, kitchen and bath rented to someone other than a family member. So if you have an upper lower and you don't have a separate entrance, or if you're renting that upper lower to a family member, it does not count as a duplex. Because some people try to count their house as a duplex. You include trust funds, UGMA and UTMA accounts, money market funds, mutual funds, CDs, stocks, stock options, bonds and securities, installment and land sale contracts, commodities, etc. You also include educational benefits or educational savings plans for other students, where this particular student is not the beneficiary. So if you have 4 kids, and you got 4 kids named on these college plans, you have to include the value of the other 3, but not the one for this particular student. Parents of dependent students should not report the value of educational savings accounts for other children. Wait. Oh, so Coverdell savings accounts, and if the student is not the beneficiary, 529 college saving plans and the refund value of 529 prepaid tuition plans. Parents of dependent students should not report the value of educational savings accounts for other children. For a student who does not report parental information, the accounts are always if it's owned by the student. Investments do not include the value of a life insurance, ABLE accounts, 529 college saving plans if the student is a beneficiary, retirement plans, 401ks, pension funds, annuities, non-educational IRAs, KEOG plans, or cash savings and checking accounts reported in the previous question. So if you report something under the cash and savings, you don't report it again in investments. You only report it once. And when you go through the FAFSA online, there is a little help question mark that will give you the information just for that question. But that's a great question. And if you notice, I just rattled off a lot. It's this much space on this page. I mean, so they cover quite a bit. All that information is on their website. Other questions? Oh, you can't tell me I answered them all. Go ahead.
So I know we touched on this, but does it benefit you to apply to do FAFSA as soon as it opens up versus waiting until August before you turn it on?
So the question is, does it benefit to apply right away when it opens up, or can you wait till August? I'm going to tell you, financial aid offices really are frustrated for people who wait till August. We don't have the staff to help you. We're small staffs typically. What's that? So that's the next question, is there a financial reason? So first of all, you want to pay attention to schools' priority dates. If they say, please have your FAFSA done by March 1st or February 1st, please follow that, because it might implicate any institutional funding they have. The other thing is the federal programs are entitlement. So entitlement means that money's always there for you. The state of Wisconsin's grant programs is a pot of money, and when it's empty, it's empty. So you don't want to be the last one filling out a FAFSA. You want to do it sooner rather than later. And when I say sooner, if you're meeting the school's priority dates, you're fine. You know, if there's a reason that you can't file by the priority date, then just make sure you stay connected with the financial aid office. We have some that can't. We have some parents that are, they're 4 years behind in doing taxes and, you know, whatever else because of their businesses or their accountants and yada, yada, yada. And first of all, I feel really bad. If you have any of that things happening in your household right now, please find a way to get up to date, because it's really hard on the student trying to figure out how they're going to fund school, and you have to have your tax stuff done. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Other questions? I will stick around for a little bit in case there's some more private questions that you want to ask. I have my card up on the table. I also brought a few things about Lakeland. I take a little time to do a little promotion for them. But my card is there, and you're welcome to call anytime. I'm happy to answer questions. It's important that we get this form filled out for students so they get some funding for college. Thank you.